slightly different because it is the season, and I'm going to ask Ryan. Ryan, what's your favorite Christmas movie?
Mine is "It's a Wonderful Life."
Mm.
It's become a massive tradition in our house that yeah, every Christmas Eve, open a bottle of wine, sit down. It's the one time of year that I cry when Clarence gets his
Have a good
wings at the
cry.
end and everyone's around the piano. Yeah, I love it. We went to the cinema to watch it about a decade back, and now with kids and everything else, it's kind of that's the wrapping's done, time to chill out, time to yeah. That's Christmas begins properly at that point. I'll be working right up until the buzzer this time, so that will be officially Christmas has started. And
Nice.
yeah, a little bit of a tradition that I love. How about you? What's yours?
Great. Wait, right. I'm gonna dumb this down a little bit. So
Do it.
yeah, I'm actually so I could have chosen Elf just because it's just a bit of fun.
Classic.
Could have chosen Polar Express because I just love the way it's animated and what it stands for and things like that. But I'm actually going to go with the Muppets Christmas Carol.
Nice.
One, it's a classic story. You know, you can't beat that, can you? Old Scrooge. Um, but two, it's the Muppets, and I don't think you can beat them for a bit of entertainment. And three, it's just very well put together, and it's just something for the kids and something for adults as well. So not as cultured, I don't think, as yours, but that is my choice. Yeah.
No, and now there's going to be several songs from that are stuck in my head for the foreseeable. So yeah, that's what your Christmas gift to me, I infer, is those earworms.
Brilliant. So should we get on with the episode?
Yeah, why not?
Final one of 2025. Ryan, Merry Christmas. Can we say that?
I think we can. We're not too far out. Are we? Merry Christmas, mate. Yeah, we've very nearly made it. Um, and I think tradition dictates. I stole from other formats. We were probably due an end of the year roundup kind of episode, aren't we?
I think we might have mentioned that on the last episode. That there was something. Let's call it a Christmas special. Yeah, this is our Christmas special. Um,
Yeah.
and what we decided to do is give you a very brief backstory of how we've got to here, but we're going to have a look at the last 12 months and pick three headline news stories as we normally do. And we'll give you two opinions because that's what we do. And we'll have one takeaway each at the end of it. But starting with the backstory, the reason that this is kind of poignant and we've decided to do the end of the year review, one, because it's coming up to Christmas and we needed an episode, but two, everyone else does it. And three, it links very well to how we all started. So I started the podcast Construction Disrupted looking at technology, but I've always been a keen follower of Ryan and what he does on LinkedIn and his posts every week, his construction roundup posts. And it just became clear and obvious to me that it'd be really good, one, to have him as a co-host because he speaks more eloquent than I do. And two, it makes sense because all those stories that are in his roundups each week on LinkedIn are about construction and they're massively important in construction. So what we've done for this episode is we've had a look at all the news stories within Ryan's roundups. That's what you should have called it. Within the construction within the construction roundup that Ryan does every week. And we've chosen three of the best with a sprinkle of festive optimism in the air, I think.
We always try with that, don't we? Oh, but what a lovely intro. But yeah, absolutely. I've yeah, been having a look back through at what's got the best engagement this year, and it's funny sometimes the stories that you remember or the weeks that you remember are not necessarily the ones that have the biggest sort of takeoff.
Mm.
Interestingly, it's there's a couple that we've actually covered on this podcast before, which gives a nice sort of tie back together. So should we dive into the first story and then go from there?
Yeah, I think so because this one and only episode is the one where we felt quite in sync and ready for it, didn't we? Which is a good way to end the year.
Yeah, which just throw me off slightly that we've actually got a plan for this one. So yeah, let's
I'm
dive in
worried.
before we
I'm
get
worried.
to. I know it feels strange. It feels really strange. So let's journey backwards in time a little bit to the summer where, and we were 12 months into the new government, and consequently, just as we and everyone else are doing their sort of end of year roundups at the minute, there was a big focus at that point on 12 months on from the election. How is the government doing, particularly in the context of construction. And there was one piece in particular within housing today. We've talked about 1.5 million homes. We've talked about, Steve Reed and his new appointment and everything else that went on there. And around that point, it was a particular piece by Churchill Living's chief executive, a chap called Spencer McCarthy, that really caught my eye and seemed to it captured the sentiment of everyone within that sector, which I think it feels prevailing, if I'm perfectly honest. That a lot of good intentions, a lot of sort of understanding of where policy recommendations were coming from,
Mhm.
obvious support for the 1.5 million homes target. Who working in the housing sector wouldn't be supportive of being part of achieving that. But a slight feeling of overwhelm, I think it's fair to say. Lots of policies being introduced, and even if you felt, as I say, that they were well intentioned and even helpful in a lot of cases, um, to unpick where we were on planning reform, it's such a massive thing to do. But then to do that in the context of all the other things that the sector needs to deliver, skills, environment, everything that we've been talking about in recent weeks. Yeah, it felt like a lot all at once at a time where the economy and market demand was subdued. And therefore working against you. And then obviously talk then starts on, are we going to get anywhere near this target? So it felt like a really fair, balanced piece that as I say, still feels like the prevailing sentiment today. And very, very topically actually brings us bang up to date with the raft of new policy introduced by government in the last week. Obviously, planning and infrastructure bill now getting its royal
Mm.
assent, which has been cheered, particularly within the civils part of the world and the infrastructure part of the world. But yeah, an absolute raft of new headline proposals being introduced. All again, well intentioned, all with the aim of getting us to fix a planning system that feels blocked rather than there to help us build. Making yes the default when it comes to new build homes, which again you would think the housing sector is going to cheer, but yeah, as I say, I'm as keen as anyone, as you well know, Pete, to see this happen and to get things moving. And I'm still taking the government's rhetoric at face value in that I'm hoping that years 3, 4, or 5 of this parliament are where it really starts to tick up. I saw an interview with Steve Reed last week where he was referring to the hockey stick shape, that this really sharp increase at the back end. Um, yeah, I'm hoping that they get there, but yeah, it does feel a bit like history repeating within a 6-month time frame. I don't know what you made of these new announcements.
Yeah, yeah. So I think this whole story it typifies where we are in construction right now, with 1 year on from Labour, if you like, or a year of the Labour government, and it's quite poignant, really, that a lot of what they've done, and maybe it's just because we're in it, but a lot of what they've done and what they're saying that they're going to do and the policies that they're going to deliver, like you've said, have been construction and infrastructure heavy, which is a positive thing because they're taking note and they're actually trying things and doing things. And in musing on this, when we decided this was going to be the lead story we go with, it's pretty much what you said in terms of it's not this year. This year is very much the basis, and you could see it as a review year and getting things right. And then it is the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, or however many years they're in power, to actually get it right and put it in place. And unfortunately for this year, the proof is going to be in the pudding,
Hmm.
and that hasn't been baked yet. If we can stay with the cooking analogy, so it's positive signs because of all the policies and everything. They're doing the right things, but I think it would be difficult not to do the right things from where we started.
Yeah, yeah, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that, and I think that's my hope, is that these things are so common sense and individually been so welcomed by sector that yeah, the cumulative effect is a positive one. I think my slight concern is obviously going back a couple of weeks. We were in a similar kind of a spot with with the budget, where I feel like the economy, and particularly in our part of the world, doesn't take much to spook us at the minute. And obviously,
Mhm.
the looming spectre of the delayed autumn statement was kind of held out as a real reason for people, electing not to invest and electing not to build and so on. That I'm worried we're going to end up in a similar kind of a position with, even if people agree broadly with these terms,
Mm.
let's probably these recommendations rather. Let's see what gets adopted into policy before we then commit to build under these new terms and that new framework. Just to bring people up to speed with kind of what's been included here. Um, a fresh set of proposed reforms to the National Planning and Policy Framework, which again people have spoken about needing for some time. So in and of itself, in a kind of academic sense, I guess, should be very popular with people. But again, let's see what the appetite's like practically. Um, the biggie within that is looking at the creation of a new medium site category for housing schemes
Mhm.
of 10 to 49 homes, which I think would come with building levy exemptions and therefore lower cost and an ease of getting things built and so on. Um, Trimming of some environmental regulations, again, biodiversity net gain on small sites is something that has been discussed previously, both in the positive and in the negative. Um, and again, it's been much talked about, but this idea of shifting planning decisions away from councillors to planning officers, less of that NIMBYism, again, more where the default for planning applications on medium-sized developments is yes, rather than things getting kicked into the long grass and
Mm.
stalled and so on. So again, you look at all these things individually, they should be thumbs up, and hopefully they are thumbs up. And they're things that get things moving faster rather than things that give people sort of reason to, yeah, to sort of reconsider and see where they're at. I feel like we're a very, we spoke about this last week, in fact, we're a very risk averse sector in broad terms. And I think any kind of
Mhm.
change is disconcerting for people. But I think where businesses have had a tricky time economically, cash flow is tight and so on, and people are taking a bit of a watching brief. I just have a little niggle of worry that, yeah, these are going to be well-intentioned policy
Mm.
recommendations that just give people reason to take another look at a point where we want people to be confident and commit and to move forward. I know, well, that's something we'll talk about a little bit later on, but in broad terms, I think we're looking at 1.3% growth GDP next year. And construction predicted to form fractionally better than that. But again, most of that growth in the back end of the year in quarter three and quarter four. So um, let's see, perhaps it's another sort of start of the year where people would take a bit of a view of what they think the market is doing. And then, yeah, as the rest of the economy starts to pick up, so we pick up with it, and we'll see where things get moving. Can't deal with any more months of PMI report decline. So yeah, something's got to give somewhere for my sanity, if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. Just going through these points in which the article that I read was in New Civil Engineer about the
Mm.
Planning and Infrastructure Act. I'd say there's like 12 points, and as you're reading them in isolation, like you said, they all get a thumbs up and they all sound great in theory. And then you start to read into them a little bit more, and there's that fine, I'm not saying there's a right, I'm not saying there's a wrong, and I'm not saying this is negative at all, but there's that fine balance between, okay, so you're giving councils more power in a certain way, and land acquisitions will be simplified for things like housing and schools and stuff like that, which all makes sense. But then you're taking away from other areas, and I know there's been some backlash with some of these in terms of conservation areas and environmental and things like that. But you never, I'm sorry, you're just never going to please everybody. And like I said, I'm not saying they're right, I'm not saying they're wrong, but if you read them, as long as they are done correctly with the right kind of nous when people are going through these processes, then it all sounds fantastic.
Yeah,
So
I think so. I think so. And
yeah.
again, as I said before, I think, because NC have covered it. I think most titles have. Construct Inquiry was another one, and Housing Today from a pure play housing point of view. I think New Civil Engineer and their audience, and I think they should be the ones that are the most positive in broad strokes about
Mm.
this, given some of the policy bits there. But I'm with you. I think it's about, as in all things in life, to be honest, Pete, it's kind of about the intention going into it. I think we've spoken about it enough times before, but we keep talking about 1.5 million homes in the abstracts. It's just this kind of like this target to chase or this figure to chase. But what a difference it could make to individual
Mhm.
lives and to the country at large if we're able to deliver that level of housing provision and everything else that comes with it. To your point, if we're building homes, they need to be in communities that include better schools, better transport links, better access to job opportunities and so on. We spoke about the negative sides of urban regeneration as well as the positive sides of it. That these things are done with the inhabitants of that area in mind. And yeah, like I say, I think, and that doesn't mean environment be damned or
Yeah.
people with genuine sort of concerns as to overdevelopment in their area. Like, of course, those things should be heard, but yeah, I think if the intention ultimately is positive and is about what is the most impactful positive impact we can have on people's lives, then yeah, I think hopefully we're not a million miles off. Just fingers crossed that it's adopted easily enough that we don't spook the industry and that we can actually get on and build. Wouldn't that be
Yeah,
nice in
yeah.
next year's roundup?
Build, baby, build.
Quite.
Okay, let's move on to our our next one, which is full of positives, but from a negative stance, really. And this is college admissions in some areas being halted because the demand is so high. Do you want to take us through this one?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, well, and people that have listened regularly will recognize this isn't just one that I posted about on LinkedIn and that we've doubled back to, but this is one that we've actually covered before,
Mm.
which is about demand for FE courses. I think we inferred from doing a bit of wide reading that there's a few different things happening, but the broad thing to celebrate is that construction courses oversubscribed. The sort of 8 areas that exist within the government's industrial strategy, all doing very, very well at an FE level, which is great. Construction in particular doing phenomenally well. I think 89% of colleges that were surveyed said they'd seen a spike. Some growing their intake for construction related courses by as much as 20%. And 77% reporting substantial demand in construction courses. And that was the members of the Association of Colleges that had answered that. So I think just let's celebrate that in and of itself.
Mhm.
There are a number of other things that come off the back of that. Again, I'd mentioned being on a panel discussion, or rather chairing a panel discussion a little while back with the assistant principal of Wigan and Lee College, who do phenomenally well in this area. They're a centre of excellence for construction. Saying that they could almost have an unlimited number of places and they would still be able to fill them. Such was demand. Um, but their slight concern off the back of that was referred to as the stickiness in sector. That it's great this demand exists at this level, but
Mhm.
do we have enough, solid employment opportunities? I was going to say permanent, but we know what the sector becomes like at a certain level for casual labour, for self-employment, and so on. So I don't want to denigrate and kind of make it sound like only people that have a permanent, full-time role we know how peculiar construction is in that respect. So I don't want to sound like I'm talking down to anyone there, but that was a concern that we can have as many college students as we want and college leavers as we want. Ultimately, it's only going to be of benefit to the sector if they are contributing to the sector afterwards, and that was a slight
Mhm.
concern. But first things first, I guess that's it's phenomenal news, isn't it? That we are appealing to that younger generation.
Yeah, and it's that next stage. We're never happy, but it's that next stage after this, isn't it? That to get them and keep them in the industry itself to hit targets we're looking to hit in terms of a table, if you like, or any kind of stats from this story. But the percentage of colleges that have waiting lists for construction, it was 56%,
Mm,
and the closest to that is health with 33%. And then after that is advanced manufacturing with 21%, clean energy, digital and technologies, and then a few things after that. But even the ones below that, such as advanced manufacturing and clean energy, they're linked. They're linked to
yeah,
construction. They're linked to the built environment. So even then, it's more than just construction waiting lists.
yeah,
There's
completely.
people waiting in what we're classing as other sectors or other industries that'll have a phenomenal impact on construction in general. And it's almost like the people that we're saying are retiring over the next few years, we need to bring them back in to train these people in that have got college waiting lists and open it up a
Yeah,
little bit.
for
That
certain.
that being yeah, that being said though, Sorry, go on. Right? Do you have?
No, 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 go after you.
I was just going to slightly change the tangent there. That being said, though, because we're going to have to mention it at some point, and I think it links back to the previous story. That yeah, it's great to get them into construction, but we've got to remember the future of construction. So the things like MMC, AI. Got to mention AI. Did we mention AI this year? I think we did. I'm sure we did, but we're not going to mention it here, or are we? Is it going to steal our jobs? I don't think it is. But the point being that it is AI, it is more technological, it is digital, it is information, it is data, it's all those kinds of things, as well as the manual
Yeah,
work. It's going to be a whole. It's not just one. We don't just need brickies or sparkies or plumbers or civil engineers or architects or whoever it is, project managers. We need them all, for this supply chain to work. And
yeah.
it's not just that construction headline thing that we should be looking at. It's other skills that we can bring into construction as well.
I completely agree with you. I think it's worth celebrating in and of itself, but it's one domino to fall, isn't it?
Yeah.
When we look at the because I've had this conversation with people several times. Obviously, the thing that brought you and I together initially was me coming on here as a guest to talk about deconstruction, which obviously is the not for profit that I run, focused on the image of the sector and its impact on our ability to attract and retain talent. So this is a massive one from our point of view because the headline statistic we ask every year through YouGov, we ask the public, would you consider a career in the sector? And the needle hasn't really moved at a headline level. It's
Mhm.
still around 68% of respondents saying no, I wouldn't consider a career in it. The one encouraging thing this year, which really aligns with this story, is that young people, so those aged 18 to 24 in full-time education, the best respondents to that question, the most positive respondents to that question, and that has swung from them being the worst to best over the last couple of years. So something really is happening there, and we've spoken about it. The various hypotheses on it's what's happening within the wider economy. It's the increasing cost of university education and therefore degrees not seeming attainable or value for money in a way that they were, and therefore people looking at more vocational routes. But I'm absolutely with you, and it's something that I've been passionate about for a long time. Is that I've heard other people say we don't have an attraction problem, and maybe that's right on that basis. If you define construction in that narrow slither as high vis, hard hat contracting
Mhm.
role, as useful as those things are, and as much as we
Yeah.
absolutely need to get people in that area, I see the results that come out from the RICS survey that says that their average age of member is approaching 60, and that they're concerned about a third of their membership. I think that the Royal Town Planning Institute said a similar kind of a thing, that they're concerned about age profile of their members and people retiring from sector, and the pipeline at the bottom end not being filled up quite quickly enough. So I think that's job number two. Is, if I've said before, if we can make the sector as appealing as possible to as many people as possible, and it feels like we're on the road to doing that now.
Mhm.
It then becomes about funneling people and guiding them towards the role that is most interesting and most appropriate for them. And it's a much easier problem to solve once we've got that overarching demand piece sorted. If you don't
Mhm.
have the talent pool in the first place, then you're on a bit of a hiding to nothing. And I'm not saying it's job done by any means, but if we're looking for positives out of this year, I think this is one of the more positive stories there, that regardless of macro factors that have led us to this point,
Mhm.
because in fairness, without getting too drawn into the whole CITB stuff that's going on at the minute and everything else, and I'm not saying that it's their job to recruit people either, by the way.
Mhm.
But whatever the factors are that have driven us to this point, I do think it's a positive that we are having a discussion about oversubscription and what do we do with all this demand. And yeah, hopefully we're on the path to making that a more tangible medium term thing that we can then start to push people towards specific roles and specific parts of the sector.
And to carry on the deconstruction survey conversation, the image that we have at the moment, this is huge news and very positive for the sector, but we still have that image problem.
Yeah,
And looking at one of the questions that you ask in deconstruction, it's how important are certain sectors for the UK, and nearly half of respondents say healthcare. And I
yeah.
think that's because it's immediate. You can see it. You've 99.9% of people will have used it and benefited from that service. Whereas construction, it isn't immediate. It takes time. It's not, we're going to do this project, it's delivered tomorrow. You're talking 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years even to do a
I
particular project. And it was only 4% of people said that construction is important to the UK. And it's like that's for me is number one. We need to highlight how important this sector is for the UK.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting and slightly terrifying stat. I picked up on it in last year's report within the recommendations. I think there's a couple of reasons, and you touched on a few there. I think much easier for healthcare to do. You'll have private providers and
Mm,
ancillary providers into the sector, but for the most part, if you think healthcare in this country, you think National Health Service, and
yeah,
there's two things there. One, much easier from a message control point of view to have a single organization or a single brand to then sort of communicate and convey those messages, whereas construction is so fragmented. I couldn't even tell you. I mentioned CITB probably unfairly. I don't think there is any one body that is the true representative body of the entire sector. I know there's several that will
yeah,
tell you that they are, but even within that, who is responsible for being that voice of the sector and for managing that image in the first place? So I'd say that's point one. Point two is where I do think we can claw back some ground, and I think we can learn lessons from the NHS. Think back to COVID and us banging pans on the front and applauding for frontline healthcare staff and so on. Everyone pretty much in this country has some emotional story tied to the NHS, whether it's the birth of one of their children, their loved one being taken care of at sort of end of life, or some sort of emergency that's been treated or illness that's been treated. Us or someone else, we have those stories that we hang on to, and any politician that ever threatens to take funding away or, God forbid, but privatize the NHS is met with absolute bile from the public. Um, I think we have a similar kind of a cradle to grave story. Again, if you think of the homes we live in, the hospitals that our kids are born in and that our loved ones are cared
mm,
for in, the schools that they're educated in, etc. We have a similar kind of a story to tell. But again, I think it's a hypothesis, but we're so fragmented and so in our own little corners that there isn't that joined up, cohesive, emotive message that is easy to digest and therefore people sort of relate to. I understand why we would only get 4%. It's frustrating, for people like you and I that are much closer to it and clearly are as passionate about this as we are. Um, it upsets me, but I understand it, and I think,
yeah.
yeah, I think with some proactive management and a clear organisation or person taking responsibility for that, I think that's a much more straightforward one to tackle than seems to be the case on the surface of it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Right. Final headline for
So,
2025.
well, this was honestly was my favourite article. Just one that I resonated with massively at the time. Um, we've said it before in sort of looking for 3 stories a week for this, and in wanting to be a bit more positive than the headlines. That's easier than some weeks are easier to do than others.
Yeah.
But this was an op-ed written by Chloe McCulloch, the editor of Building Magazine, titled "The Case for Optimism in Construction." And in that, Chloe lays out a lot of the reasons why there isn't much optimism or hasn't been. This was written back in August, but it could have been written this week, in fairness. To look at some of the economic stats and some of the typical sort of proxy performance stats that one would look at within the sector doesn't make for great reading, and some of the pull quotes from senior leaders in the sector don't make for great reading. So Chloe kind of challenged herself, I think, to sort of go
Mm,
beyond those particular stats and those quotes and see if we could find some optimism. And I think there is that. And again, as I say, it could have been written last week. We touched on a lot of these recently. I think the colleges admission stuff, I think, is really, really positive. I think some of the employment stats that I've seen and sort of new entrant stats into markets, we've touched on, apprentice applications and things like that. The amount of work that's sat in infrastructure pipeline for any criticism of government, going back to our first story, they've been a decent end client as far as public
mhm.
projects goes. That there's a lot of Heathrow, being the big sort of flagship one, but there are lots of other initiatives on the transport side of things and others. Whether you think there's too many policies or not, per our first story, but they're at least trying to do something to get pipeline moving on housing and other parts of the construction economy. So, yeah, I think I know it's been a tough year for people. I don't want to sort of gloss over that and pretend that all things are rosy. That's certainly not the point of this podcast or what we're here to do. But yeah, I do feel like within this article and within our conversations, I do feel like there is enough positive things there that with a fair wind in 26, we could end up with a decent year. What do you think?
Mm. I like the way she starts the article with you speak to construction folk and they'll just say it's grim. I quite like that because it frames the article really well, and it's really well written from the point of view of she starts with doom and gloom, and then she doesn't go over the top, far from it, from saying everything's gonna be okay, everything's brilliant, we've gotta have a positive 2026, it's gonna be fantastic, and neither do we, in a way, you know, we look for those positive signs like she has in this article, and sorry, Chloe has in this article. Um, and she's done a really good job at pinpointing these little chinks that are easy to forget, but they start to add up, like increased commercial lending and things like that, and major projects. You know, 400 million on 60 Grace Church Street Tower, 700 million British Library redevelopment, and 530 billion infrastructure pipeline, over 780 projects. You know, it's not like when you hear the word grim and you hear the word construction in the same sentence, straight away you just think, "Oh, well, everything's stagnating, nothing's moving, nothing's changing, downward trajectory, it's game over." But I think you ask a lot of people in the industry, there's not many years where they go, "It's brilliant this. It's great. We're having a whale of a time because construction's hard, and it's meant to be hard because no two projects are ever going to be the same. We work with the elements, we work with nature, we work with infrastructure, we work with humans, we work with digital and manual and a whole host of things. Not to mention the fragmented supply chain, but above all that, above it all, we still manage to create an output and we still manage to deliver projects. Some of them on time, some of them not, but we're still moving forward, and there's still positive things to be had from it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think it probably leads us on nicely to takeaways, I guess. It's and not just takeaways for this episode, but I guess takeaways for 2025 in some respects. I don't know if you want to lead the charge there, Pete.
Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna first of all finish with a statement. The last paragraph from Chloe, because I think she deserves this little bit of limelight, and this can be her takeaway. So we'll have three takeaways on this one, and she ends the article with, "This is a pivotal moment. What the government does next could either boost or shatter any emerging signs of confidence in the market. Critical issues undermining that confidence. Regulatory delays to projects, forthcoming employment legislation, and plans for the next budget can only be resolved in partnership with the private sector. The government must change tact, stop treating construction firms as a problem, start working with them on solutions." I think it nicely frames 2025, and I think the government has started to do that in some way, shape, or form, like we've discussed on this episode, which is fantastic. A lot more to do. So my takeaway is sticking with this, and to say for 2025 and looking forward to 2026, it's not all doom and gloom. It can be really hard. It can be difficult, and not one. And I think we said this before, but not one sole sector, part of the industry will solve this problem. It's a collective, public and private. So it's about working together. And I think that's the only way that we can achieve what we want to achieve, or have a more confident view within construction. And that is working together like we do on this podcast.
Quite, very well said, sir. Um, do you know? I would say I think my sort of takeaway from this episode. Nice to look back actually on
Mm,
25. And like I said, I know it's not been a phenomenal year for a lot of people. But I think that's my reason for optimism is if you've stayed the course to this point, you're doing something right. I mean, it's a very sad reality, and not what I want to sort of labour and sort of stay on for too long. But we see the stats on, number of liquidations, administration events, several high profile ones already in the sector this year. We talk about it from a marketing point of view a lot with clients on the long and the short, and sort of thinking about the immediate wins and what you're building for in the long term, and where to plan for and where to index. Now, I think the same is true with any industry, but certainly with construction as well. That yeah, if the economists are right, there's probably a tricky immediate period ahead, but it
mm.
looks like that's gonna give. So, you know, take the steps that you can now. It's something like if you're listening to this, then you will have been doing already, but keep on with it. Keep on with the steps to keep your business healthy for the medium term. Keep the belief and the optimism that there are better things for you on the horizon in the medium term. And yeah, I think just as we've said before, stay informed. Keep listening to us, because why not? We'll do our best to keep people informed on these things. But yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about what's to come for the sector, and I think yeah, we've been beaten up by a few things over the last decade or so,
Mhm.
haven't we? A lot of which has been beyond our control. And if you're still here and you're still fighting through it, then I think that in and of itself is reason for optimism. So yeah, keep on going, and let's see what 2026 brings for us all.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, we'll close 2025. Wishing everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Have a decent break, and 2026 full of optimism, full of construction disrupted chatter. And we look forward to it.
We'll see you in the new year. Merry Christmas, everyone.